digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. This week we're coming at you live from VR World Congress in Bristol, and we are joined by an absolute array of individuals at this table. And I'm going to start out on this corner over here and explain who we've got. We've got Steve Dan from Medical Realities / Amplified Robot, who is also the president of the VR AR Association London chapter and the founder of the Augmenting Reality Meetups as well.
That's right.
Did I get everything on the list?
Everything right.
That's such a big list, Steve. We've got Jeremy Dalton from PwC, who's VR, I'm going to say, evangelist.
Yes, certainly accurate.
That's
Evangelist not only outside the firm, but within the firm.
within, internally, within. Then we've got Simon. Now, Simon, am I saying that you're from Barrock, or am I saying you're from somewhere else?
Cooperative Innovations is a new studio.
Yes.
Also chair of the Yuki Mixed Reality subgroup and Yuki board member as well. Yeah.
Awesome. And then we've got Sam from Make Real. Are there any other hidden titles I should know about here?
I'm also game producer on Tamika with Radial G, but today I'm here mostly as Make Real, promoting our serious side and our new game Loco Dojo, which is coming out in 2 weeks.
Awesome, thank you. And then we have Liam.
Should I say my
From
title
Rift?
before you get the company name wrong again?
No, it's Rift. I know it's Rift. I just can't get the letters right. It's a video games tax credit, which you'd think I'd be able to figure out what order the letters go in,
That's
but
it.
my brain never functions correctly when you say it. But why don't you say it for us?
Rift v GTR. They are.
There you go. So, having collected this array of experts in the VR industry around us at VR World Congress, no less, I thought it'd be interesting to have a little chat about the array of different VR events that there are currently in the calendar, because there do seem to be quite a lot of them. And I am curious, especially for you, Steve, because I see you at every single one of them, how you decide which ones you're going to attend. So I'm curious what your thought process is on this, Steve.
Oh, that's simple, Tanya. I attend all of them, so that I don't have to decide.
You need to clone them because there's way too many of them.
It's absolutely getting that way, especially when you sort of roll up the things I could be going to in America, for instance, as well. That's for sure. I do need to have a doppelganger.
So out of interest then, in terms of overseas shows, okay, let's just go through the shows in April to start with, because we're currently in the month of April. And so certainly in the UK, we've got VR World Congress, we've got the virtual reality show, VR Worlds. There's another one, I can't remember what the name of it was.
That's the three I definitely know.
VR was one of them, wasn't there? Or not really?
No, but there was something else this month at the very beginning.
Mixed Reality Summit, of course.
That was it, yes, the Mixed Reality Summit. There's so many different shows going on, and so I'm curious, not taking into consideration overseas shows, how do you as a studio make the decision as to which shows you want to invest in? Because it is an investment when you turn up to a show.
Yeah, it tends to be the other contacts that we want to speak to there as well. Obviously, there are better expo opportunities. So VRLA, I think it's next week, or this week maybe they're setting up for it. I think.
This week.
This week, yeah. But I'll be in Croatia next week, for instance, for Reboot, which of course is a bit more on the game side again, but there's some interesting people going from the VR market. And so yeah, for me it tends to be which people I want to be in front of and continuing conversations with, so rather than the business or the talk side of things especially.
Well, I know that I, for example, have had personal conflict this week about whether or not I would come to VR World Congress, because Star Wars Celebration happens to be this week as well. And I have a long-standing relationship with the franchise, so I was kind of a little bit torn. And there's a lot of people who are currently messaging me going, why aren't you coming to Star Wars Celebration? And I was like, VR World Congress takes priority, I'm afraid. So I am curious from your perspective, Sam, you know, when you're thinking about what the priorities are from a networking perspective, is there any additional value for you in terms of figuring out who's exhibiting and who's actually speaking?
To be perfectly honest, when we look at events, we generally look at the networking and the non-ticketed side of things. Develop is always very good for meeting people in the bar. There's always interesting talks and the expo, but we've always found since doing events, there's always at least one valuable lead that comes out of it. For our sort of more traditional work for hire agency side of the immersive tech that we do, it's always interesting to discuss and help educate people with what's possible. But a lot with expos, when you suddenly get a rush of school kids, they're obviously not the ones with money going to be signing up big projects for corporates.
Yeah.
You then need to be able to get in front of the right people. So we actually partner up with larger corporations who then bring us in to run like a VR lounge experience, and then they will bring their key clients and partners, heads of L&D and that kind of thing to us. So we have a very streamlined, cherry-picked connection set up for us.
Okay. I find this interesting actually, because you talk there about like the different types of people who are attending, and certainly this idea of young or inexperienced types turning up at certain shows. And the interesting thing with VR is because it's such a spectrum and there is such diversity across what VR is applicable to, so you have these really different types of shows and different types of conferences, some that are very film orientated, some that are very games orientated, some that are very corporate orientated, depending on which vertical you're from. So I'm curious from your perspective, Liam, when you think about, in terms of how these things are skewed, what would be the advice that you give to somebody who's new to coming to these things? Like, the first time somebody turns up at Cannes or GDC, for example, it's like, it's so overwhelming to turn up at a show like that. You have no idea where to start. What would you say to somebody who's going to their first VR conference?
I think you need the kind of mindset of what you want from the show. If obviously you are more into the kind of games heavy side, kind of like what we do as a business with VGTR. Obviously, I'm going to be more focused on the video games aspect of VR. But then again, on the other side, I may be more interested in the tech side of it from an R&D aspect. So you just need to go in there with an open mind and understand what you want from the expo. Be a lot more targeted on that instead of just, I don't know, throwing as many cards out as possible and then something hopefully is going to come from it. Actually spend your time, usefully, really.
Okay. So here's the other thing around this table, and I'm reasonably confident everybody around this table, maybe you're not Sam because I don't know you as well, but I'm pretty confident everybody around this table has done a speaking gig at a conference of some sort, right? Yes? We've all been speakers at something.
Yep.
So here's the other thing I'm really interested in is, given that there are so many requests coming through to speak at different events, how do you prioritize where you actually want to speak and what you want to speak about? And I throw this open to the table.
Well, I do a sort of default intro to VR, what I call past, presence and future talk. And that's very good for a lot of events like this, where if you have an area or a track where it's all about newcomers or new verticals looking to understand how VR could be incorporated, but we're still at that very much education phase in terms of people learning for the first time, and as a company who is focused entirely on VR development, making sure that our partners and clients don't come to us with ideas that are just impossible or potentially damaging, and trying to encourage others who, if they're going to jump on the bandwagon, they're going to jump on with 2 feet in the right way, with the right approach, rather than doing gimmicks and harming adoption overall.
Do you know, it's interesting you say this, because I know that Jeremy and I are guilty of the same thing here, which is there's certain phrases or certain things that we say every single time we speak. And I know that some of my key phrases are things like, just because you can doesn't mean you should, and stuff like that. Jeremy.
The funny thing is, it's a bit of a challenge. That's the problem, because the audience at these events is often so diverse in terms of their understanding of VR and what industry they're coming from and what level of knowledge they have of VR. I mean, ideally, I would like to present on topics which go a little bit deeper than the surface into niche areas, whether it's web VR or social VR or the UK landscape or whatever it is. But the problem is that to go deeply into those, you have to have an assumed initial knowledge, and that's not always there in the audience, which is the problem, which is why it's useful to do a general piece at the beginning, like the past, present, and future.
It's much like the VR industry as it is now anyway, in terms of new players or people who have not tried VR experiences before. We've got a similar kind of thing with the events and the audiences. For us, so we did a live cooperative demo of our game Raiders of Erda, which is an online co-op RPG game. So we did that at the Mixed Reality Summit last week. So for us, it was more of a press and a awareness for investors kind of thing, to show that off, and make sure we hit the milestone of getting it done in time for that day was quite a nice challenge to set ourselves as well. But we use events for that kind of purpose of just getting the word out to journalists, to other people in the industry of what we're doing, and it kind of covers a few hundred influential people at once, hopefully.
Do you know what, though? The interesting thing is that at the Mixed Reality Summit, when you did that demo, one of my personal kind of frustrations with that is that there were a lot of people in that audience who did not understand the significance of what they were seeing.
Oh, yes, possibly.
They were watching it and they're kind of, that's kind of cool. And I was like, seriously, this is concurrent multiplayer in VR, and there is no latency here, people. And there were a lot of people who just kind of, oh, yeah, they're fighting. Okay, I get it. They're fighting. And you're like, no, that's not what this is about. So I do think there is
as long as you did, that's the job done then.
As long as one person in the audience got it. But I am curious though, in terms of how do we help to curate some of these events from the speaker side of the fence? Because I think that there is a certain amount of influence that we have as speakers to help to re-steer some of these conversations and re-steer some of the themes of what's kind of being talked about. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what is the one thing that you would like to see change, in some of these conferences and panels that you're doing, or when people are asking you to do things? What's one thing that you kind of would like to see them maybe shift a little bit?
I'd say have them held in virtual reality to save us from travelling everywhere.
Do you know, it's a really...
in VR, isn't it? Is the conference they're planning right now?
Yeah. Well, we already do that with Outspace VR. We make sure that all of the events that Steve and I do in the augmented reality meetup, they also happen in Outspace VR. But I do find it really interesting that there's a lot of people who are doing conferences and there is no actual event within VR to support that. I find that quite interesting. Jeremy, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, have you heard of In VR, the VR conference that's going to happen in December? I thought that was quite interesting, related point.
Yeah.
Interesting business model, $5,000 for a 5x5 meter
virtual booth.
But the beautiful thing about that is it leads on to this whole aspect of the digital economy growing. I mean, we already had it. We already had it in video games for a long time, but I don't think it's being truly understood and respected enough. But I suspect when VR takes off, then we will have a resurgence or a big evolution in that industry, and it will become a significant and respected force in the world, an economy in its own right.
I've said this a few different times now at different conferences and panels, where I still genuinely believe people who come from the MMO industry and who understand the econometrics of MMO environments and virtual worlds are going to be at such an advantage when we finally get this concurrent, unified VR environment, and it's becomes a thing.
The metaverse.
the metaverse as such. But seriously, there'll be this thing where we have this alternate identity within this virtual environment, and the people who understand how this stuff works, they're going to be at such an advantage. But that's just me.
That's exactly why we're focused on everything we're doing as a cooperative online experience with shared player kind of statuses, options and preferences all across all of the games that we're making, and hopefully that system might expand out to other games and stuff in the future as well, and as things grow and develop a bit more.
Okay. So I'm interested to hear from you guys as well in terms of formats. So a lot of what I'm seeing happening at a lot of these conferences is basically either a panel or a presentation. But as you've rightly pointed out, there's not enough people who are doing stuff in actual VR. And I remember, Jeremy, a really fun time with you wearing the mocap suit and being projected directly into Outspace VR for your presentation. Do we feel that there should be more of that kind of thing happening, or not?
I think absolutely, and the fact that Tanya, you and Steve managed to make it happen at a meetup, means that it's absolutely possible at all of these conferences, and it should be done. Not as a novelty factor, because it is genuinely adds value, because there will be people from all over the world who want to attend and are enthusiasts of virtual reality, and they will be willing to attend in virtual reality. And the wonderful thing is we can run dual presentations in the real world and VR at the same time, so absolutely.
Okay.
It is still quite a surreal experience though. Back in 2014 with the Virtual Reality Awards, Radio G was up for People's Choice and won, and I had to go into Riftmax Theatre, don my virtual tuxedo, move my character up onto stage to accept the award. But in reality, it was 4 a.m. I was in my bedroom in my dressing gown, having just woken up to attend. But in VR, I was somewhere very much smarter and doing a bigger thing. But I still had the same nervousness when you actually get on the podium in front of the virtual audience, freezing and going, oh my God, what do I say?
I think there are 2 points there. Well, the first point is that the concept of reality is now malleable and flexible enough. And the second point is that VR is so immersive that it does create those emotional responses, as if you were in a real world presentation, getting a bit nervous about getting up on stage. It happens in the VR world as well.
But I also think this could be a solution for Steve's problem, which is instead of duplicating yourself, just avoid all the travel and just send everything in VR.
I think unfortunately the business side of things still is the skin contact, looking someone in the eyes is still not quite there. Once we've got eye tracking and more full body tracking, maybe it'll be more of you can do more relationships with people, but certainly for first time meetings on stuff, I think unfortunately we're going to still be putting up the air miles and everything else that we accumulate.
And ultimately, it's still much more pleasant, having a nice tapas on a boat or having a fine wine in evenings rather than just sitting at home with coffee and our cats.
And looking outside, it's rather sunny out here. I'm not sure we'd get the same feeling in virtual reality.
And let's face it as well, we're working in a business that's so like high tech, and we're still giving out bits of cardboard to each other when we contact. So why are we still doing that?
Yeah, no, I just think it's absolutely true. I think actually meeting people face to face still has the edge over everything else. And also, it's actually, when do you make the useful contacts? It could be actually inside the conference, walking around the exhibition space, or meeting up afterwards, for a drink or a meal or something like that, or just bumping into people in the hotel lobby, which I've done this morning. It's people that I didn't expect to see. I couldn't have set that up in a VR way to sort of. Sometimes it's the serendipity of who you meet at these conferences that works really well.
Okay, so here's the thing. First of all, I think you all have a secret agenda, which is I think you want to see events happening in warm, sunny places. Just saying. So here's what I'm going to say. Is what would be the one thing that you would say to event and conference organisers, to people who are asking you to speak at events or panels, and to other attendees? So those 3 different people, what would be your key message to each of these groups? And I am going to start with you, Jeremy. You're one of the most regular people on this show, so you get picked on.
Okay, so what was the first group? Was it event organisers?
Yes, the event organisers.
Okay.
Like, what do you want to see them change or do?
To event organisers, I'll be honest, I usually split up, and this semi-answers the question about people who are asking me to speak. I split it up into 2 groups. One, where it's very much a business transaction. The conference is there because it makes money. And the second group is the conference is there partly because it makes money, because of course, that's important, economic situation, but I can see the passion in the organisers. They actually care about VR, they want to see it grow, they want to see the industry evolve, and I feel far more connected to that side of things. So if anyone asked me to speak, and I had to choose between 2 conferences, I would definitely go for the ones that are passion versus the economics of it.
Okay.
To the users.
Yes.
To the attendees, I would say, is this piece of advice to give them when attending conferences? Okay, my advice would be that quite naively, when I used to look at conferences and decide what to do, I would look at the agenda. But, and I think Sam and Simon have touched upon this point, but I think it is absolutely valid. The networking opportunities now are the most important thing for me, and also the chance to try out all the kit and the demos in the expo. So my advice would be, don't just sit in Theatre 1 for the whole day. Go out, explore, see the expo, and also meet some people to say hi.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was going to say on all the points there. I completely agree. I think all the organisers need to get together and halve the number of conferences so you have larger audiences at each one, and just save a little bit more in between so we can do some work as well.
Okay.
I've got design documentation work and programming I need to be doing. But yeah, I think that'll, like the headsets, the number of VR headsets that are out there, we've got a huge amount of them, and then they're going to boil down to a few less of them as things converge a bit more. Same will happen with the conferences, and we'll have the sort of the true winners for the particular verticals, or the ones that cover all the verticals. There'll be a mix, but hopefully just less. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything that you'd say to a first-time noob coming to a show?
It was exactly what was said. I always find it's the serendipitous kind of meetings and stuff that you have. They're the ones where the leads come out from it, and I do keep attending events until I stop getting leads from that certain event. Basically, I mean, ultimately, the business side of it is my main reason for traveling.
Yeah.
I enjoy the speaking and talking about what we're doing, but ultimately it needs to be paid for somehow, and so it tends to go out to the biz dev kind of hat that way. And so for attendees who are doing that kind of side of it, make sure you are networking and not drinking too much in the evenings, but chatting to people and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So for event organisers, I would suggest maybe something like the colour coding of ski runs.
Yeah.
So people can clearly see what's a blue, red, black run, etc. If they want the real deep, heavy stuff, then there's a lot of coder and graphical development discussion, or like my intro to VR.
Yeah.
If it's your first time,
Yeah.
you're just finding your feet, and trying to understand
light
it.
touch stuff.
Yeah, you sort
Yeah.
of don't want to scare yourself too much.
Okay.
But also, as expos, it's cost of space. As we all need more space for room scale VR and big Vive, especially if we're doing multi-user Vive setups.
Yeah.
Looking at ways of reducing costs somehow, because the traditional calculation of how much booth space costs
Yeah.
is just going to escalate and get worse for everyone. And as we're all indies and there's not a lot of money
Yeah.
in VR yet, that really determines how many events we can attend, is the cost of having a VR setup. So for attendees, I'll be slightly flippant and say personal hygiene is key. Just be prepared to have things on your face. Maybe
Yeah.
think about
Bring your own wipes. 'Cause
bring your own
seriously-
wipes. Yeah.
Seriously, it really bugs me that nobody thinks about this, and it's like the whole, if you're going to put a billion headsets on your head at a conference, people need to actually clean their headsets in between uses, because they still don't do that. It's like, you're at a conference, guys.
We do, I think.
We do, yeah.
There's a lot of exhibitors who
Yeah.
don't, a lot of them who
But
don't.
then we also have very clearly, headsets we use for dev
Yeah.
in the office, and headsets that go to expos,
Yeah.
and then
Like
they go
the
into
grimy-
decontamination.
the grimy ones. Yeah.
Or unless there's an investor we really don't like and he gets to...
Okay, so if anybody's coming around to your place, what about you?
I would say to the people that are running the expos is just keep looking out for new companies and people that are actually, just to make it fresher really. The amount of expos I go to where it's just the same old stuff, I won't say the other word, it's just sometimes there's just the same old faces, the same old things. Get new people and fresh blood in, because people will keep coming back. It makes it more interesting. From a person that's attending, do your research first off. Go to, reach out to your network and say, are you going to this? Is there anyone else that I could potentially meet that could be useful? Vice versa, anyone from my network who you wish to meet. And use it as that opportunity and network between each other. That's what I would say.
Or alternatively, become somebody's wingman, as you have today.
Exactly that.
Steve, what about you?
Yes, Tanya. I think it's actually the conference organisers ought to spend more time thinking about actually recording the actual sessions,
Yes.
and then not only recording them, but actually editing them and getting them out there in a
Distributing
timely manner,
Yeah.
and making sure that everybody can find them. Because I think there's a lot of very interesting stuff said, and it's a shame that I went to a couple of sessions here yesterday, and there were 300 or 400 people in the room. But in actual fact, what was said should be reaching a much wider audience, and I think that should be done. For attending, I think it's actually come and have fun, and actually don't come with too rigid a sort of an agenda, and because things will happen and you'll get opportunities. So actually keep aware of where the opportunities are and who you could meet, and don't stick to too rigid an agenda. Because I should be somewhere else right now, but I'm doing this.
You're sticking with us, Steve.
One more for sort of people to conferences: introduce someone you meet to someone else that you meet might be useful, and the same will probably happen to you. And the karma sort of works in a really good way in terms of introductions and networking.
That person you just introduced will remember that and thank you for that, and do the same back.
Okay, and I'm just going to add some practical tips, because I'm being all motherly. Wear comfortable shoes. But I will also just kind of say that I do think it is incredibly important that you don't stick to a set plan, because the stuff that happens outside of the actual speeches and panels that are going on is usually the most interesting stuff. So remember, it is not a sprint, it is a marathon. That's all I'm going to say. But, as always, we like to give our listeners a way to find out a little bit more about what you're up to. We ask you to do this by sharing with us your social media handle of choice. And we will start with you, Steve.
Thanks, Tanya. Well, my social media choice these days is VR, #2, AR.
It's the best. It's the best handle. VR to AR. I love it. Okay, Liam.
So my two Twitter handles would be @GamingTax or @RiftBDM.
Okay, Jeremy.
Twitter handle is @Jeremy C. Dalton, DALTON.
Mine's Barog, which is BAROG.
Mine is VR_Sam, or Make Real 3D, or our new game, Loco Dojo game.
Okay, on the basis on the basis that a few of you might have something you want to promote just now, why don't you tell us the URL for your game?
LocoDojo.com. Sorry, no, that's wrong. LocoDojoGame.com. LocoDojo.com is random martial arts gear.
Don't go to that one. Simon?
The VR studio is coopinnovations.co.uk.
Anybody else got anything they want to sell?
No, I'll show you my LinkedIn profile. JeremyDalton.info.
Oh, for me at the moment, it's my medical realities VR work, which is at Med Realities.
Wonderful.
And come speak to me about VGTR and email me on liam@gamingtaxrelief.co.uk.
No, he gave us an email address. Okay, we can't be held accountable. Oh, but thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for listening. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd. DigitalJamSessions.com